Summary of the comic script. The elderly in the disabled elderly village hear the cries of a baby echoing through the darkness from outside the village. Everyone is surprised, including Def, as the village is located in a remote area. Gani Sai decides to investigate, despite Old Ma warning her of the dangers of leaving the village at night. Gani Sai attempts to carry a stone statue with her for protection, but is unable to do so due to her physical limitation as a hunchback. Review of the comic script. The script appears to be setting up a mysterious and potentially dangerous scenario, with the introduction of a crying baby in a remote area. The characters' reactions and interactions reveal their personalities and relationships, such as Gani Sai's determination and Old Ma's concern. The story also highlights the challenges and limitations faced by the elderly characters, particularly Gani Sai's physical disability. The script raises questions about the origin of the baby, and the potential threats that exist outside the village, creating tension and anticipation for what will happen next. A person offers to help an elderly individual carry a statue. The elderly person, referred to as Old Ma, is told they won't be able to carry the stone statue for long with just one arm. However, Old Ma claims to have enough strength in that one arm to carry it. The elderly person is accompanied by someone who is limping, and they are warned to be vigilant as they leave the village, as strange things may try to slip in with the removal of the statue. As they walk out of the village, unusual and unknown things float around them in the darkness. As the stone statue shone with a faint light, all of them shrieked strangely and retreated back into the darkness. Following the baby's cries for a while, Old Ma and Granny C moved forward and arrived at a huge riverbank. This was where the baby's cries were coming from. The faint glow from the stone statue did not reach far enough, so both of them had to intently listen to the direction that the sound came from, moving upstream. After a bit, the cry could be heard nearby. At the same time, Old Ma's only arm had nearly reached its limit. Granny Sai used her bright eyes and spotted a small fluorescent glow in the distance. The glow originated from a basket that had stopped at the riverbank, which was also where the cries had been coming from. It really was a child. Granny Sai moved forward to pick the basket up, but she was startled upon realizing she couldn't. Under the basket was a pair of pale white hands that had become bloated by the river water. These hands were popping up the basket and the child inside of it, pushing them all the way to the riverbed. "Don't worry, the child is safe now," Gani gently said to the woman under the water. Chapter 1 is about a warning in disabled elderly village. The warning is to not go outside when it is dark. This warning has been around for years, but nobody knows when it started. Despite the unknown origin, the warning is considered true. In the village, Granny C gets anxious as the sun sets behind the mountains. As the sun disappears, the world becomes silent. There is no sound, only darkness approaching from the west, covering everything in its path until it reaches the village and engulfs it. 4 ancient stone statues had been erected at the 4 corners of the village. These statues were so old and mottled that even Granny Sai didn't know who sculpted them or when they had been constructed there. As darkness fell, the 4 statues emitted a faint glow in the darkness. Seeing the statues light up as usual, Granny Sai and the rest of the elderly in the village let out sighs of relief. The darkness outside began growing thicker and thicker, but with the light of the statues, the village was still considered safe. Suddenly, Granny C's ears twitched as she let out a cry of astonishment. "Everyone, listen! A child is crying outside." Beside her, Old Man shook his head and replied, "Impossible!" As the figure walks, hands loosen their grip. The woman disappears into darkness, swept away. Granny Sai lifts the basket, finding a swaddled baby inside. A jade pendant with a fluorescent glow rests on the clothing. The glow of the jade pendant and the stone statue are similar, but the pendant's glow is weaker. The jade pendant protected the child in the basket from the darkness, but its weak glow could not protect the woman. It's a boy. Returning to the elderly village, all the villagers who gathered were old, weak, sick, and disabled. Granny Sai peeled away the swaddling cloth to take a look at the baby, and the remnants of her withered, scattered teeth broke out into a grin. The villagers were surprised to see a healthy baby. One of the villagers, who only had one leg, asked, "Are you planning on raising him, Old Woman Sai? We can't even take care of ourselves." Granny Sai became angry and said, "I, an old woman, received this child with my own strength. Why must I give him away?" The group of villagers became quiet, and did not dare to oppose her. Carried on a stretcher, the village chief came over. He was slightly worse than the rest of the elderly. At least the others had limbs, even if they were less than those of a normal human. He, on the other hand, had no limbs at all. However, everyone was very respectful of him. Even the fiend-like Ganny C did not dare to be impudent. Since they were going to raise him, should they give him a name? She asked. Village chief replied, "Old woman, do you see anything else in the basket?" Ganny Sai went through the basket and shook her head. "There isn't anything in here other than this jade pendant. The word on the pendant is Qin. The jade is pure and has a strange power, making it a unique object, possibly from a wealthy family." The village chief considers the question and decides that the boy's surname should be Qin and his name should be Mu, hence Qin Mu. The expectation is that when Qin Mu grows up, he will become a leader, which should be sufficient for him to survive. The name Qin Mu is given to the boy. Ganny Sai looked at the swaddled baby who wasn't afraid of him and was unexpectedly giggling without a care. The sound of a flute echoed across the riverbank. A young boy sat on a cow, playing a melodious tune on his flute. The young boy looked to be around a certain age, and he had delicate features, such as his red lips and white teeth. With his shirt half open, a jade pendant dangled in front of his chest. This young boy was indeed the baby that Ganny Sai had picked up from the riverbank a long time ago. The elderly in the village had painstakingly raised the boy over the years. Ganny Sai found a cow to provide milk for Qin Mu when he was a baby, helping him survive a challenging period. The origin of the cow was unknown. Despite the villagers of disabled elderly village being unusual, they were kind to Qin Mu. Ganny Sai was a tailor, and Qin Mu learned various skills from him and other villagers, including tailoring, gathering and refining herbs, leg skills, and breathing techniques. As a result, time passed quickly. The cow had been Qin Mu's companion since childhood, and when Ganny Si planned to sell it, Qin Mu was unwilling, so he took on the task of herding the cow. Qin Mu often sat by the riverbank, surrounded by green mountains and bluish-white clouds, content with the peaceful scenery. A cow he was sitting on spoke to him, saying, "Qin Mu, save me," which shocked him and made him jump down from the cow's back. The cow's eyes were welling up with tears as it spoke in a human voice. "Qin Mu, you have consumed my milk since you were a baby. I can be considered your mother, so you need to save me." Qin Mu asked, "How do I save you?" The cow replied, "There's a tool at your waist. Cut away my skin and you can save me from being tapped." Qin Mu hesitated, and the cow asked, "Have you forgotten the care in which I nurtured you?" Qin Mu raised his sickle and carefully cut the cow's skin. It was strange, but when the cow's skin had been peeled away, not a single drop of blood flowed out. In addition to that, the inside of the cow skin was unexpectedly empty. No flesh or bone could be seen. Halfway through peeling the skin from the cow, a woman who appeared to be 20 to 30 years old rolled out, both legs still wrapped in those of the cow. Her skin and the cow's skin were connected, but her upper body had already been separated from the cow's skin. With her disheveled hair, the woman grabbed the sickle from the hands of the flabbergasted Qin Mu and cut the cow's skin from her legs in 2 swift moves. Her courage turned into malice, as she looked at Qin Mu and pointed the sickle at him, laughing coldly. A lady transformed from a cowskin expressed intense anger toward Qin Mu, stating that she was turned into a cow and forced to feed him milk. She had given birth to a child before being transformed by a witch. Now freed, she sought to kill Qin Mu and slaughter all evil beings in the village. However, before she could harm Qin Mu, she was suddenly killed by a knife from behind. The killer was revealed to be Grandpa Cripple from the village, who informed Qin Mu that Grandpa Apothecary wanted him to return home for his medicines. Qin Mu was left in a daze, looking at the cowskin and the lady's corpse. Qin Mu was instructed to return by Sipple, who patted him on the shoulder and chuckled. As Qin Mu returned to the village, he looked back and saw Sipple disposing of a lady's body into the water. The scene had a significant impact on Qin Mu, and he was unaware of when he returned to the village. Later, Qin Mu was scolded by Granny Si for attempting to sneak out of the village at night. Granny Si told Qin Mu to stay back, and Qin Mu asked why they couldn't go out when the sky is dark. The stone statues at the 4 corners of the village automatically lit up as night fell. Qin Mu was dragged back by Granny Si, who was trying to stop him from sneaking out to investigate something. When the sky becomes dark, some scary things will move around in the darkness. Going outside means certain death, Granny C said solemnly. The stone statues in the village protect us, and the things in the darkness do not enter the village. Qin Mu asked, out of curiosity, if other villages have stone statues like this too. Granny Sai nodded her head. However, she kept looking outside of the village with a worried expression, mumbling to herself that someone should be back soon and she should not have let them go out. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment before telling Granny C about the strange event that happened today regarding a woman that emerged from a cow's stomach. Granny responded casually. Are you talking about that woman? Sipple told me about that. He settled it properly. When you were weaned at 4 years old, I wanted to sell the cow away. But you didn't want me to. In the end, I let you care for it. You see what happened. I said you would definitely develop feelings for the cow if you drank its milk until you were 4 years old. Qin Mu blushed. 4 years of age was definitely too late to wean a child off of milk, but that wasn't the important thing here. Granny, Grandpa Sipple killed that lady. It was a good kill. Granny Sai laughed and said a woman made a certain agreement which allowed her to survive this long. She stated the woman would have died many years ago, if not for a particular necessity. Qin Mu was unsure what she was referring to. Granny C glanced at him and explained that the woman was the wife of the lord of a city located far away. The city's lord had a reputation for being unfaithful, and the woman was known to be jealous. The lord enjoyed going out and interacting with women from respectable families. Summary of the comic script. The ruler of the city would punish a maiden by having her beaten to death if she was defiled. A character had planned to assassinate the ruler, but instead turned the ruler's wife into a cow after seeing her with a young child. The wife managed to break free from the seal and speak. Astonishing Qin Mu. Granny Sai offered to teach Qin Mu how to transform a human into a cow. Review of the comic script. The scene begins with the introduction of the ruler's brutal punishment. A character's plan to assassinate the ruler is foiled when they see the ruler's wife with a young child, and instead, they turn her into a cow. The wife breaks free and speaks, astonishing Qin Mu. Granny C then offers to teach Qin Mu the transformation technique. Sipple returns to the village, and as he enters, darkness floods in. A fierce multicolored tiger, still alive, is on his back. Content. The ruler of the city defiled the purity of a maiden. His wife would send men to beat that maiden to death. Originally snuck into the city planning to assassinate him, but when saw that she had just given birth to a child that was only 3 months old, and saw that she had the milk the child needed, turned her into a cow. Didn't think that this woman would actually manage to break free from the seal, speak, and nearly harm. Utterly amazed, Qin Mu cried out, Granny, how do you turn a human into a cow? Granny Sai chuckled, revealing withered teeth. You want to learn? I'll teach you. Oh, Sipple is back. Qin Mu looked over and saw Sipple limping back, gripping a crutch with one hand and carrying a beast over his back with another. Darkness came flooding toward the village like an aging tide, causing Granny C to worriedly shout, Move faster, damn Sipple, faster! What's the rush? Sipple continued walking toward the village at a steady pace. And at the exact moment he entered the village, the thick darkness flooded over the entire village. The beast on his back, a fierce, multicolored tiger, was still alive. The darkness brushed against its tail, and it suddenly howled in pain. Qin Mu rushed behind it to take a look, and saw that the only thing left of the tiger's tail was bone. All of the tail's skin, fur, and flesh had disappeared as if something had chewed everything off. Qin Mu gazed into the darkness outside the village. Curiosity piqued, unable to see anything in the pitch black. What is it that exists within the darkness, he thought. Old woman Sai smiled as she excitedly pulled Qin Mu into the village. Stop looking out there and come here. Today is a significant day. The village chief, Old Ma, and everyone else are summoned to gather. A bright light illuminates the village as the village chief is carried out on a stretcher. He inquires solemnly about the whereabouts of the 4 spirits. It is confirmed that they have all been found. Old Ma then reveals a huge snake, dozens of yards long, which reeks of blood, but remains alive, unable to move due to Old Ma's firm grip. Meanwhile, the blacksmith arrives, carrying a massive bird, slightly larger than himself, with its wings and legs bound, and whenever it attempts to struggle, sparks fly from its feathers. The cackling noises its struggling created were terrifying. Blind then called out a giant tortoise that was much larger than a table. Only nature knew how long this giant tortoise had lived, for even its shell had turned golden with age. All 4 limbs of the beast were hidden inside of its shell. A claw would sneakily stretch out from time to time. In one instance in which it did, Qin Mu saw vapor coming from the bottom of it. The vapor looked as if it was strong enough to lift the golden tortoise up and help it escape. The only reason the tortoise was unable to do so was the fact that Blind had a hook piercing its nose. The village chief talked about using substitutes for the green dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black turtle, as the blood of these 4 spirits could not be found. The alternatives would be the green dragon snake, iron bone tiger, lightning bird, and golden turtle. The village chief nodded to the resident butcher, who moved forward with his hands and arms. The butcher had only the upper half of his body, with everything below his waist cleanly severed. 4 vats were placed in front of the green dragon snake, iron bone tiger, lightning bird, and golden turtle. Summary and review of comic script. Village chief called out to apothecary after Bucha sliced into fierce beasts, letting out their blood, which soon dried. Apothecary stepped forward. A person with a severely disfigured face, missing nose, skin, and part of lips, making him the ugliest and scariest person in the village. However, Qin Mu thought Apothecary was the nicest. Apothecary stepped forward and took out peculiar leaves. On each leaf was a snow-white insect egg. Apothecary dropped a leaf into every vat. In each one, a lava could be seen hatching from its egg, coming to rest on the leaf and drinking the blood. The more blood these lava drank, the bigger their bodies became. The blood in all vats quickly disappeared, leaving behind a big worm in all vats. Apothecary scattered some white crystalline foam that resembled salt into each vat, and Qin Mu could actually see the worms rapidly shrink. The sight made him click his tongue in wonder. A moment later, Apothecary picked the 4 worms up. Each of the worms was only the size of a person's palm. Taking out 4 white porcelain cups, he tightly squeezed one of the worms, causing it to squeak loudly. Crystal clear amber blood flowed from its mouth, filling up a cup. Doing the same thing to the other 3 bugs, Apothecary squeezed the blood from each one's stomach into the remaining cups, then placed all 4 in front of Qin Mu while shaking his head. Only this much spirit blood could be refined. They are not the real spirit beasts after all. The 7 great treasure vaults in the human body are spirit embryo, 5 elements, 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, life and death, and divine bridge. These 7 great treasure vaults are inherently sealed, just like hidden treasures that are locked away, and are referred to as the 7 great divine treasures. The 7 great divine treasures are normally sealed and require a method to unseal them, the village chief said. His aura intimidating as the light of the bonfire's blaze flickered across his face. Walls are what stand in the way of a person trying to awaken their divine treasures. There is one for each treasure: the spirit embryo wall, the 5 elements wall, the 6 directions wall, the 7 stars wall, the celestial being wall, the life and death wall, and the divine bridge wall. The process of breaking through these 7 walls is called wall break. Grandpa Ma gently caressed Qin Mu's head with his remaining hand and smiled. It is impossible for a person to cultivate if a wall can't be broken. Some people are blessed by the heavens. When such a person is born, their spirit embryo wall will have already been broken, naturally unsealing their spirit embryo divine treasure. This kind of constitution is called a spirit body, gifted by the heavens as the perfect seedling for cultivation. People with a spirit body have talents superior to that of normal people, allowing them to cultivate at an exceptional rate. The story talks about spirit embryo, which has 4 elements and 4 kinds of spirit bodies, including green dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise. To determine if someone has a spirit body, their blood is needed. A character named Old Ma, who has 1 arm, demonstrates the process by drinking green dragon spirit blood, awakening the chi of the green dragon. He shows this by taking off his shirt and standing topless, then shouting and revealing a green chi emerging from his back, forming a green dragon shape from his tailbone to the back of his head, as the scales, bead, and hair of the dragon appeared. A dragon claw extended Old Ma's only arm, while another 2 dragon claws coiled around his legs. This is a green dragon spirit body. One-armed Old Ma put his shirt back on. Old Woman C has a white tiger spirit body. Granny C rolled her eyes and said, I won't take off my clothes and let you old dogs take advantage of me. I shall show Qin Mu by shaping my ki. Granny C's body shook slightly as the indistinct figure of a ferocious white tiger appeared behind her, a faint bestial aura resonating from it. In the village, everyone possesses a spirit body. The villagers were once glorious, but now they are elderly and disabled. Granny Sai stated that the disabled elderly have nothing to offer. 4 cups of blood from different spirits are the key to awakening a spirit body. For example, those with a white tiger spirit body can awaken the chi of the white tiger within their spirit embryo by drinking white tiger spirit blood, similar to how a green dragon spirit body works. Village chief and others looked at Qin Mu with anticipation as he prepared to drink a mysterious concoction that could potentially awaken the chi of a powerful spirit within him. Qin Mu felt his heart pump wildly as he lifted one of the porcelain cups, having never consumed anything as strange as this before. Despite his experience with gathering and refining herbs from apothecary, the cup contained a special liquid which was extremely hot. He drank it all in one shot and felt a burning sensation spreading from his throat to his limbs and then his bones. He felt an intense heat inside his body, one that was so hot his blood seemed to be boiling. After a moment, the burning feeling faded. The village chief asked Mute if he had a special body. Mute the blacksmith shook his head. The village chief then told Qin Mu to continue. Qin Mu took the second white porcelain cup that contained white tiger spirit blood. Drinking it felt like drinking molten iron-filled slag, tasted like copper, and stung his mouth. He felt that same stinging sensation throughout his body, which then faded soon after. He doesn't have a white tiger spirit body. Granny Sai shook her head in slight disappointment. Qin Mu, the third cup, village chief said solemnly. Qin Mu drank from the third cup. A summary and review of the provided comic script is as follows. It contained a pure liquid extracted from a huge serpent. The liquid made him feel as if the fluid in his muscles expanded, uncomfortably pressing his internal organs. This swollen feeling subsided. The elder shook his head with a disappointed look. He doesn't have a specific bodily constitution. The apothecary revealed a subtle smile, looking sinister. Qin Mu drank the last cup full of a dark liquid. His body became light as he drank it, like being immersed in the water of a river. However, the feeling quickly vanished. He doesn't have a special spirit body. Apothecary shook his head. The villagers around the fire became silent. Then Butcher said, If that's the case, he's just an ordinary human. Granny suddenly began to cry, struggling to speak. All of us are old and disabled. Qin Mu will not be able to continue living if we pass away. It is so dangerous for him. He would not survive for even a short time. Qin Mu grabbed Granny C's hand and gently said, Don't cry, Granny. You and all the grandpas are good people. Nobody will pass away. Good people? Old Ma laughed at himself. We were all forced to retreat to the Great Ruins, struggling to live at death's doorstep. The Great Ruins are too dangerous, so it will definitely be difficult for Mu to survive without us. Summary and review of the comic script. The scene is set in the disabled elderly village, where a discussion is taking place about sending someone out of the Great Ruins for safety reasons. Buche warns that if they send him out, they will all be discovered and killed due to their association with him. The village falls silent until the village chief speaks up, agreeing to the plan and referencing the person's constitution. Granny C expresses confusion, questioning what is good about the situation. It is a great seedling. Butcher, apothecary, and the rest of the villagers gave him blank stares, unable to understand why Qin Mu's constitution was great. Village chief smiled and explained, My guess is that Mu has another type of constitution, one that combines the strengths of the 4 great constitutions. An overload body. An overload body? Granny Sai and the rest showed skeptical looks. All of them were experienced, knowledgeable people, but they had never heard of an overload body before. Yes, an overload body, village chief grinned. It's difficult for normal spirit blood to awaken an overload body. Summary and review of the comic script. Blood from the 4 great spirit beasts must be collected for the overlord body to show itself. None of the 4 great spirit beasts remain in the Great Ruins, but it shouldn't be too hard to find their descendants. Continue capturing beasts and refining their blood. Once Qin Mu drinks enough spirit blood, his overlord body will awaken naturally. Everyone trusted village chief, So all of the disabled elderly in the village were overjoyed to hear him say all of this. Tomorrow I'll go with Cripple to catch a tiger. Rest early, Mu. You'll still have to drink more spirit blood tomorrow. Once everyone dispersed, Apothecary and Mute brought Village Chief back to his room. After Mute left, Apothecary remained in the room and softly said, "The Overlord body doesn't exist." Village Chief nodded. "I said that without thinking. However, if I hadn't said anything, it would have been hard for everyone else to continue living." Apothecary was at a loss for words. Everyone in Disabled Elderly Village had their own history, but they were all forced to move to the Great Ruins. Struggling to survive, all of their sorrows weighed heavily upon them. Qin Mu was partially the reason why everyone could continue living up to this point. The appearance of this healthy little baby had cleansed the sorrow from everyone's hearts. As they raised Qin Mu, they began to view this little boy as their most precious family member. It was Qin Mu that held the fragile hearts of the people in Disabled Elderly Village together. If the villagers knew that Qin Mu only had an ordinary body and wouldn't be able to survive in the Great Ruins by himself, all of them might actually lose control. Apothecary was expressionless, unable to hide the truth from them forever. "All of us will die of old age someday and leave Qin Mu behind. That is why we will never tell him that the Overlord body does not exist. We will keep it a secret from him for eternity," Village Chief said solemnly. "Let him believe that he has the one and only Overlord body." Apothecary was stunned as he examined Village Chief's face. Under the dim light from the oil lamp, Village Chief's face seemed to be particularly bewitching as he smiled. "I want to see if an ordinary person with unparalleled faith can achieve something that even we, people with spirit bodies, cannot." Apothecary gave him a blank stare. Village Chief nodded deeply, stating that as long as there is faith, a mortal body will become an Overlord body. Apothecary had his own approach, instructing to make Qin Mu drink as much spirit blood as possible. This would make his physical body stronger every time he drinks spirit blood, potentially making it more powerful than any spirit body. Village Chief laughed, saying this would terrify those outside the Great Ruins, and both of them looked at each other with excitement before Apothecary walked out of the room and closed the door. The villages acquired a few more ion bone tiges, Geen Dagon snakes, lightning bids, and golden totices the next day. With a goal to strive for, all of them were eager to work. Apothecary, however, got angry. "Qin Mu will be harmed if he drinks so much spirit blood in one go." The blacksmith dragged 2 lightning bids over and laughed mischievously, revealing his mouth. "Mu can endure it." Granny Sai had faith in Qin Mu, yet Apothecary just stared at them and went silent. He took out the lava and continued refining the blood, but things still went wrong. Summary of the comic script. The amount of spirit blood was too much for Qin Mu, causing his body to inflate as if he were filling with air. All of the elderly villagers became extremely nervous, worried that Qin Mu would explode with a bang. Review of the comic script. Apothecary took out a few hollow silver needles, stabbing them into Qin Mu's back and the top of his head. Red, blue, and purple gases spewed from the holes in the protruding end of each needle. After some time, the stream of gas from each needle stemmed and stopped. Apothecary then removed each needle and gazed at the others. "Take things at a steady pace, step by step. All of you trying to force-feed him as if he were a glutton will just harm him. He is unbearably bloated right now. So all of you make yourselves busy. To help him digest the spirit blood, he will be training his knife skills with Wuxia, his fists with Old Ma, and his legs with Cripple. Now, it's time for some knife training." Wuxia shoved both his hands against the ground, actually launching himself into the air and landing on a nearby pile of wood. Since he didn't have a lower body, the combined height of the pile of wood and his upper body allowed him to match Qin Mu. Wuxia held a pair of pig-slaughtering knives in both his hands, but these knives were different from the normal ones. Normal pig-slaughtering knives had blades that were curved into a crescent moon and were no more than a foot long. In addition to that, they had circular wooden handles. On the other hand, Wuxia's pig-slaughtering knives had a similar design, yet were significantly larger. The blade of each knife stretched out to a yard in length. The backs of the blades were thick while the edges were very thin, and both sparkled with a polished sheen. Side by side, both knives were tremendously huge and resembled an arched doorway. Although he only had one, Qin Mu's pig-slaughtering knife was the same size as Butcher's. It was extremely heavy, weighing over a significant amount. Qin Mu would usually be able to barely lift that single knife, but after consuming the blood of the four spirits, his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Lifting up the pig-slaughtering knife with just one hand no longer felt like a struggle to him. "Watch out, Grandpa Buche." Qin Mu wielded the knife with one hand and rushed at Buche, who was on the wooden pile. Buche laughed loudly, radiating a heroic aura despite having only half his body. Qin Mu swung his knife up and down as he moved toward Buche. The knife flashed faster and faster, creating whistlings of wind. Buche started to make a big fuss as his blades became a flurry of metal in front of him. His blades clashed against Qin Mu's, creating a din that sounded like a storm tearing pea blossom trees. Buche said Qin Mu was too slow and his pig-slaughtering knife could still go faster, as speed is the essence of midnight battle across stormy cities. Qin Mu and Buche engaged in a fierce battle, with Qin Mu determined to utilize the speed of midnight battle across stormy cities. The pig-slaughtering knife must be as swift as the storm at night, sweeping across all the cities. The continuous flash of knives grew swifter, as if silver dragons were winding up, down, and around the wooden pile. The sound of cutting wind grew loud, and among it, blade energy swirled about. Whenever the blade energy struck the ground, a deep gouge appeared in the earth. Those were marks from their blades. Magnificent! That is the way to do it. The swifter the knife is, the more powerful its blade energy will be. However, you still are not swift enough. You must become so swift that your blade becomes a raging inferno, burning and incinerating all. Buche continued to swing his knives in a whirlwind of motion, seemingly going into a frenzy. The sight dazzled Qin Mu. Let your knives burn, let your aura burn, and let your spirit burn. Once you've set your knives aflame, that is when you'll know you've completed the divine art. As Buche continued to unleash a whirlwind of slashes with his knives, the friction between the two of them actually created a spark and set the air on fire. The two knives moved back and forth like flaming dragons, creating an awe-inspiring sight. The flame dragons hurtled toward Qin Mu, who was clearly unable to block them. At the last moment, just before they struck him, the flame dragons twisted upward, tearing the darkness of the night sky above disabled elderly village to shreds. Qin Mu stared blankly upward, a testament to Buche's terrifying knife-wielding power. Soon enough, darkness swarmed back toward the village, devouring every bit of the flame dragons and the blade energy that formed them. The darkness above seemed angry at Buche for raising his knives against them. The pitch black swarmed down toward the village, threatening to devour it whole. However, the stone statues at the four corners of the village suddenly grew brighter, pushing back the darkness. Buche shouted toward the heavens, brandishing his knives with both hands. He declared he would cleave through the darkness and slaughter his way back someday, despite his physical limitations. Qin Mu gazed at the enraged Buche in respect, noting his impressive knife skills and wondering how long it would take to train to be as fast as him. The blade of each knife stretched out to a yard in length. The backs of the blades were thick while the edges were very thin, and both sparkled with a polished sheen. Side by side, both knives were tremendously huge and resembled an arched doorway. Although he only had one, Qin Mu's pig-slaughtering knife was the same size as Butcher's. It was extremely heavy, weighing over a significant amount. Qin Mu would usually be able to barely lift that single knife, but after consuming the blood of the four spirits, his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Lifting up the pig-slaughtering knife with just one hand no longer felt like a struggle to him. Lightning flashed in the palms of the man's hands, popping and cackling. Thunder accompanied every strike, sparks flying in every direction. The thousand-armed Buddha of the Thunderclap 8 strikes was a powerful technique. As long as the fists were faster than the speed of sound, one could control the sound of thunder. Every punch and every palm strike of this divine art was capable of destroying the opponent's body and soul. Old Ma clenched his fist and solemnly said, "Use the Thunderclap 8 strikes I taught you. Attack me and control both lightning and thunder in your hands as you strike." Qin Mu remained calm, having been taught different abilities by Grandpa Ma and Grandpa Butcher, which were unlike the usual skills. Lightning flashed in the palms of the man's hands, popping and cackling. Thunder accompanied every strike, sparks flying in every direction. The thousand-armed Buddha of the Thunderclap 8 strikes was a powerful technique. As long as the fists were faster than the speed of sound, one could control the sound of thunder. Every punch and every palm strike of this divine art was capable of destroying the opponent's body and soul. Old Ma clenched his fist and solemnly said, Use the thunderclap 8 strikes I taught you. Attack me, and control both lightning and thunder in your hands as you strike. Qin Mu remained calm, having been taught different abilities by Grandpa Ma and Grandpa Butcher, which were unlike the usual skills. Legs are the foundation of all strength, Sipple said as he leaned on a cane. Despite having only one leg, Sipple was teaching Qin Mu leg techniques. Qin Mu initially thought Grandpa Sipple was the most normal person in the village, always smiling warmly and seeming reliable. However, since Sipple had attacked the woman who emerged from the cowskin with the same warm smile, Qin Mu was no longer certain about him. Sipple was skilled at concealing his true intentions behind a smile, making it impossible to determine if his smile was genuine or fake. Sipple smiled at Qin Mu. Mue. Buche praised his knives while Old Ma praised his fists. However, real divine arts lie within one's legs. When you are unable to defeat your opponent, what do? You run, of course. Staying alive is what's most important. Life isn't all good. Things can go wrong. That's why staying alive can also be considered a victory. As long as you run fast enough, you can step on anything and everything becomes a foothold if you run fast enough. The moment you are able to run faster than sound is the moment you will have reached the fundamental level of leg skill required for divine arts. Come, Mue. The blade of each knife stretched out to a yard in length. The backs of the blades were thick while the edges were very thin, and both sparkled with a polished sheen. Side by side, both knives were tremendously huge and resembled an arched doorway. Although he only had one, Qin Mu's pig-slaughtering knife was the same size as Butcher's. It was extremely heavy, weighing over a significant amount. Qin Mu would usually be able to barely lift that single knife, but after consuming the blood of the 4 spirits, his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Lifting up the pig-slaughtering knife with just one hand no longer felt like a struggle to him. Qin Mu learned various techniques from different individuals, including leg, fist, and knife methods from Cripple, Old Ma, and Butcher respectively. He also acquired skills in blacksmithing from Mute and painting and calligraphy from Deaf. Additionally, he mastered the use of echolocation and staff techniques from Blind while wearing a blindfold. Whenever Qin Mu reached a stalemate, Village Chief would call him over to practice breathing techniques. The breathing technique taught by Village Chief was a specialized method known as the Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. Although Qin Mu was unaware of its true power, the fatigue in his body would dissipate whenever he trained with Village Chief, leaving him feeling lively and refreshed after a short while. Apothecary's gaze wavered as he waited for Qin Mu to walk away before speaking up in a soft voice. Summary and review of the comic script. Village Chief taught him the most ordinary technique, which is correct as it is just a simple technique, according to the Village Chief. The Great Spirit Bodies all have their own techniques, such as the Green Dragon Spirit Body using the energy of the Green Dragon to cultivate, and the White Tiger Spirit Body using the energy of the White Tiger to cultivate. However, Qin Mu's body does not contain any of these 4 vital energy attributes, preventing him from using any of the Great Spirit Body's techniques to cultivate. Since he can't cultivate any of the techniques they use, the simplest technique was taught to him. Even ordinary people can learn the Daoyin technique and use it to cultivate, as it is the only technique that does not require attributes. This explanation left Apothecary puzzled. The Daoyin technique is too simple and normal. One would certainly be able to become a martial arts practitioner by using it, but they would have fewer accomplishments as a result. Village Chief originally thought that as well. Then a strange expression appeared on his face. However, he thinks that they may have been underestimating the Daoyin technique. He has had Qin Mu cultivate with it since childhood, and now his vital qi is extremely formidable. The only way he could unleash its full power, however, is if his vital qi possessed an attribute. The blade of each knife stretched out to a yard in length. The backs of the blades were thick, while the edges were very thin, and both sparkled with a polished sheen. Side by side, both knives were tremendously huge and resembled an arched doorway. Although he only had one, Qin Mu's pig-slaughtering knife was the same size as Butcher's. It was extremely heavy, weighing over a significant amount. Qin Mu would usually be able to barely lift that single knife, but after consuming the blood of the 4 spirits, his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Lifting up the pig-slaughtering knife with just one hand no longer felt like a struggle to him. Mue has been cultivating for a long time, which is definitely not a short period. The Daoyin technique might have been slow when he first started using it to cultivate, but his strength has been increasing rapidly. His improvement is especially noticeable on days that he consumes the blood of the four spirits. If the Daoyin technique weren't so common, it would be thought to be a remarkable technique. Both of them wore strange expressions. Apothecary let out a ragged breath and shook his head. It's still useless. Regardless of how strong he gets, vital energy devoid of attributes can't unleash much power. The look on village chief's face became even stranger. Apothecary nodded in understanding. The Daoyin technique was the most basic technique that children would normally use to build their foundations. Once a child became older, that foundation would have developed enough to withstand impacts. After confirming the type of spirit body a child possessed, they would no longer need to cultivate using the Daoyin technique. Better techniques would be available once a person broke through certain barriers, so further progress with the Daoyin technique wouldn't be necessary. As for ordinary people who use the Daoyin technique to cultivate, they would never have the chance to drink spirit blood daily. Only powerful, influential families would be able to provide such luxury, but none would waste a huge amount of resources on an ordinary heir. No such family would do what the elderly in disabled elderly village did, and constantly catch exceptional spirits beasts just to aid in the cultivation of an ordinary person like Qin Mu. Village chief had never heard of anyone cultivating the Daoyin technique to its maximum potential, let alone to the level that Qin Mu was currently at. As a result, he had no idea what level Qin Mu would be able to reach in the future. What ended up shocking Apothecary and village chief the most was, in the days to come, Qin Mu's cultivation became increasingly profound. The supposedly common Daoyin technique caused an extraordinary change in his body, making his foundation extremely solid. In just a month's time, Qin Mu became able to endure consuming even more blood of the four spirits, and his vital energy became even denser than it would have been if he had just awakened his spirit embryo divine tissue. However, even though his vital energy was so dense, its lack of attributes prevented him from unleashing any power. This made Qin Mu unable to show the true abilities of his cultivation. Qin Mu's vital energy density had positive effects, making him good at enduring hits and recovering extremely fast. He reached a point in his training where he could properly face each of his teachers, clashing with butcher's knives, withstanding old ma's fists, trading staff blows with blind while wearing a blindfold, and enduring leg training with cripple. He finished off the series of training sessions by going to Mute the blacksmith and forging iron equipment with a heavy hammer. Despite high-intensity training, Qin Mu only needed to cultivate with the Overlord body theme elixir technique, inhaling and exhaling accordingly, to be completely refreshed. The wonderful effect of the technique left village chief in shock, prompting him to have Apothecary secretly check on Qin Mu's physical condition to find out if there was any hidden damage caused by overworking himself. After checking on Qin Mu, Apothecary returned to village chief with a weird look on his face. The village chief did not find any hidden damage caused by overwork or exhaustion. In fact, since his vital energy is so dense, it is already starting to improve his overall health. The village chief was puzzled. Despite being extremely knowledgeable, he had never seen a situation like Qin Mu's. To cultivate the most common technique to this extent had already surpassed everybody's understanding of the breathing method. Qin Mu will learn to tailor from Granny today. No more fist training. Granny Sai called out to Qin Mu. The hunchbacked old woman walked over carrying a small basket filled with needles and thread. As his small steps took him out of the village, Qin Mu rushed forward and took the basket from her arm, asking, "Granny, aren't we supposed to learn to tailor in the village? Why are we going outside?" Granny Sai said they are going outside today to teach Qin Mu how to really tailor and make real clothes. Granny Sai chuckled. Old Ma, Cripple, and the rest of those old folks have recently gotten around to teaching Qin Mu some actual skills. In light of that, Granny can't be stingy. Today, Granny will be teaching Qin Mu what a tailor does best. The needle disappeared in a flash of light. In the following instant, Qin Mu saw one of the elks collapse to the ground, the other elks fleeing in fear. Granny C moved forward and Qin Mu followed her. As they approached the elk, he realized that it was still alive. However, Granny Sai's needle had penetrated the space between its bones, somehow preventing it from moving. Take a good look at this. Muer. The needle has pierced the elk's heaven soul. Granny Sai had Qin Mu remember the location where the needle poked out from, then she took out another needle and stabbed it into the elk's tailbone, stating this needle had stabbed into its earth's soul. Afterwards, she took out another sewing needle and stabbed it into the elk's navel, saying this needle had pierced the elk's life soul. Apart from these 3 souls, 7 spirits remained, the first spirit being the canine corpse, located at the top of the head. Ganisai then took another silver needle and stabbed it between the elk's bones near the first needle. The second spirit is called the concealed arrow. The concealed arrow is located at the ajna, a part of the brain. But remember, it is easy to confuse the heaven soul with the concealed arrow. Both may seem like they are placed at the same location, but one is deeper than the other. The third spirit, the yin of spark, is located in Adam's apple. There is a small, triangular indentation when touching it. That is where the yin of spark is hidden. The process involves using a needle to target specific areas of the elk. Ganisai rapidly takes out multiple needles and inserts them into various parts of the animal. The fourth spirit is said to be located in the heart, where blood converges. The fifth spirit is also located in the navel area, with a warning not to confuse it with the life soul. The sixth spirit is situated in the perineum, near the area of waste disposal. The seventh spirit is located in the lungs, which cycle between fresh and stale air. Ganisai finished the process and said binding the souls and spirits is the most important step in tailoring special clothing. It is called soul bind. Qin Mu did not understand the connection to tailoring but memorized the locations and said he was done. Ganisai then took scissors and began skinning the elk from its lips. Soon all the skin was peeled away. Strangely, the elk did not bleed after being stripped of its skin. Summary and review of the comic script. I have bounded the elk's soul to its skin, tapping all of its blood, energy, and spirit within. The elk body may be dead, but it still lives within its skin. However, some techniques still need to be used to truly refine it into proper clothing. Watch closely. Mu-A. Remember where I point. Without warning, hunchbacked Granny Sai threw the elk skin into the air. Using her finger in place of a needle, she poked the skin as it sailed through the sky. Qin Mu concentrated on committing the scene to memory and saw that Granny Sai pointed out spots before the elk skin even landed on the ground. Summary and review of the comic script. Every spot was different, and each strike of the finger carried vital energy that entered the elk skin. When the elk skin landed, it didn't crumple on the floor. Instead, it stood up like a living elk. It shook its head and wagged its tail. One wouldn't be able to tell it was actually just skin. The bizarre sight caused Qin Mu to stare blankly. Granny Sai chuckled and opened the elk skin, wrapping it around Qin Mu. This is the kind of clothing that tailors should make. Suddenly, the elk skin began to squeeze Qin Mu. It got tighter and tighter, making him feel as if it were becoming a part of his body, then forced him to fall on all fours. He felt like he had actually become an elk and could feel his tiny elk tail. Ganisai took a mirror out of her basket and placed it in front of him, allowing Qin Mu to look at his own reflection. Upon doing so, he saw that he had really turned into an elk. Qin Mu tried to speak, but he could only let out the bleatings of an elk. A booming voice rang out from nowhere, saying the heavenly devil creation technique was being used. This voice was surprised to find a rogue devil teaching such sinister techniques in the desolate area of the Great Ruins. A voice containing strong energy echoed throughout the area, feeling as if it were right beside them, causing Qin Mu's ears to buzz and vibrate. He looked in the direction that the voice had come from, and saw a few figures standing atop a cliff of a mountain about 2 miles away. Qin Mu couldn't see any of their faces clearly, but knew that they probably weren't ordinary people since one of them was able to project his voice across such a distance. He felt like he had actually become an elk, and could feel his tiny elk tail. Ganisai took a mirror out of her basket and placed it in front of him, allowing Qin Mu to look at his own reflection. Upon doing so, he saw that he had really turned into an elk. Qin Mu tried to speak, but he could only let out the bleatings of an elk. A booming voice rang out from nowhere, saying the heavenly devil creation technique was being used. This voice was surprised to find a rogue devil teaching such sinister techniques in the desolate area of the Great Ruins. A voice containing strong energy echoed throughout the area, feeling as if it were right beside them, causing Qin Mu's ears to buzz and vibrate. He looked in the direction that the voice had come from and saw a few figures standing atop a cliff of a mountain about 2 miles away. Qin Mu couldn't see any of their faces clearly, but knew that they probably weren't ordinary people since one of them was able to project his voice across such a distance, a skill that is constantly changing. stripping the skin to make clothing, has been witnessed. The elderly on the cliff solemnly shouted, accusing the person of frequently transforming humans into livestock using a certain technique, then dragging them to the market for slaughter. Many seniors of the righteous sect have been transformed into livestock and forced to gaze on grass for eternity. The elderly expressed that, having seen the methods, there is no way to trust the person. An elderly person said in a sorrowful voice that using an elk's skin and soul to create an evil thing is wrong. It is believed that many more innocent lives will be lost if the person is not stopped immediately. Granny Sai spun around, removed a needle, and softly told Qin Mu to run back to the village, as the elderly are not a threat, but staying by their side would be a distraction. Qin Mu turned back to flee, following the path of the river beside them, and was surprised to find that running as an elk was not awkward as he thought. Rather than feeling awkward, he felt as if he had always been an elk, and was faster than ever before. The little devil is trying to escape. It would be disastrous if we let you escape. Lee River's 5 disciples. It's time for your training. Your target is that elk below us. Eliminate him and bring me his head. At the same time, voices belonging to both girls and boys sounded off, understood, in a flash. 5 figures jumped off the cliff and ran down its side, swift as a speeding horse. They reached the bottom of the cliff in an instant. What are Lee Reeve's 5 elders doing here in the great ruins? Granny Sai rolled her eyes and snickered as 4 of the elders surrounded her. Considering how dangerous the great ruins are, aren't you scared that you famous selves might die here? Of the 4 elders around her, the one with the black beard coldly replied, "We heard that some creatures were hiding in the great ruins, beings that couldn't live outside and came here for refuge. Therefore we, the 5 elders, brought our disciples here to subdue them. It still ain't confirmed who's the evil one or who'll be subduing who." Granny Sai held her basket in the crook of one arm and brandished her pair of scissors in her free hand. Looking as if she had bad eyesight, she chuckled. "I haven't exercised these old bones for quite some time. What are Lee Reeve's 5 elders doing here in the great ruins?" Granny Sai rolled her eyes and snickered as 4 of the elders surrounded her. "Considering how dangerous the great ruins are, aren't you scared that you famous selves might die here?" Of the 4 elders around her, the one with the black beard coldly replied, "We heard that some creatures were hiding in the great ruins, beings that couldn't live outside and came here for refuge. Therefore we, the 5 elders, brought our disciples here to subdue them. It still ain't confirmed who's the evil one or who'll be subduing who." Granny Sai held her basket in the crook of one arm and brandished her pair of scissors in her free hand. Looking as if she had bad eyesight, she chuckled. "I haven't exercised these old bones for quite some time. Lucky for me, my abilities haven't completely disappeared. Could it be that you people want me to turn you into clothing? How dare you be so arrogant, you demon? Are you even qualified to be arrogant in front of us?" 4 of Lee Reeve's 5 elders shouted. They sprang into motion, staggering their strikes as they attacked Granny Sai. At the very same moment, Qin Mu, who was desperately running toward disabled elderly village, saw flashes of lightning. Pure white bolts of lightning lit up the area, bathing the foothills and the entire mountain in light several times brighter than the sun. Following the flashes of light, a thunderous rumbling washed over him from behind. Qin Mu turned back for a brief moment to look, but only saw waves of wind exploding outward from Granny Sai's location. The sudden storm lifted the earth, rocks, and even boulders that weighed thousands of pounds, throwing them outward at extremely high speeds. "Granny will be fine," Qin Mu said despite his sinking heart. Continuing on his way, suddenly the sound of wet footsteps rang out from the river beside him. He looked over and saw a young boy and girl dashing across the water. Both were rushing across the surface of the river, yet their bodies didn't sink into the water. The speed at which their feet hit the water, moving up and down, was extremely fast, much faster than Qin Mu could sprint. Before the river's water could even splash against the soles of their feet, the boy and the girl had already moved on, vanishing like the wind. These 2 have already reached the level of riding the waves that Grandma Cripple said I'm currently unable to reach. They're much stronger than me. The 2 of them soon surpassed Qin Mu while running across the center of the river. Once they did, they angled themselves, so they moved toward the riverbank as they can, clearly planning to intercept him from the front. Qin Mu glanced behind him and saw another person on his tail. The 2 individuals rushed through the forest at a slow pace, so entering the forest was the only option. A person shouted, "You and that powerful companion can forget about escaping." As one of them dashed into the forest, one of the two individuals in that area sped up and overtook the other. However, the person was still a step too late, allowing the other to gallop past in a transformed state. Another person said, "Don't worry, he won't escape." The pair in the lead, a boy and a girl who had climbed atop a tree, wore indifferent expressions. The girl laughed gently and suddenly increased her speed, leaping through the treetops with ease. The boy calmly commanded the others to chase and outflank the individual. Regardless of how frantically the person sprinted, they couldn't shake off the 5 people pursuing them. The 2 individuals rushed through the forest at a slow pace, so entering the forest was the only option. A person shouted, "You and that powerful companion can forget about escaping." As one of them dashed into the forest, one of the 2 individuals in that area sped up and overtook the other. However, the person was still a step too late, allowing the other to gallop past in a transformed state. Another person said, "Don't worry, he won't escape." The pair in the lead, a boy and a girl who had climbed atop a tree, wore indifferent expressions. The girl laughed gently and suddenly increased her speed, leaping through the treetops with ease. The boy calmly commanded the others to chase and outflank the individual. Regardless of how frantically the person sprinted, they couldn't shake off the 5 people pursuing them. In addition to that, he was forced to wander away from disabled elderly village, venturing deep into the great ruins. Having lived in disabled elderly village for 14 to 15 years, the farthest he had ever gone from the village was only 3 or 4 miles. Now that he had gone way past that, the surroundings started to become more and more unfamiliar. At the same time, it became progressively desolate, without a path in sight. As Qin Mu continued running, a valley came into view up ahead. Amidst the peach blossom trees that populated the valley, he could see a herd of elks. He quickly dashed over to them and blended in. In addition to that, he was forced to wander away from disabled elderly village, venturing deep into the great ruins. Having lived in disabled elderly village for 14 to 15 years, the farthest he had ever gone from the village was only 3 or 4 miles. Now that he had gone way past that, the surroundings started to become more and more unfamiliar. At the same time, it became progressively desolate without a path in sight. As Qin Mu continued running, a valley came into view up ahead. Amidst the peach blossom trees that populated the valley, he could see a herd of elks. He quickly dashed over to them and blended in. Summary and review of the comic script. The elks fled in every direction, but it was still impossible for them to escape the bloodbath. Soon enough, the elks were being slaughtered one by one. A human voice resounded from the chaotic herd of elks, questioning the actions of others. The voice asked if elks were not also living beings, and why they were being slaughtered. A girl's eyes sparkled as she gathered energy and brandished her longsword. Energy of the white tiger spread from her to the longsword, and it radiated a brilliant gold. The sword flew from her hand and shot towards Qin Mu, who was galloping alongside the elk herd. Qin Mu twisted, changing direction to dodge the incoming sword. But it unexpectedly adapted to the change in direction and continued flying towards him. Confusion filled Qin Mu's mind as he thought about the kind of technique this was. He wondered if it could be a divine art, but it didn't seem like it. As his grandfather Butcher said, that a divine art can only be achieved when one's martial path has been cultivated to the extreme, and this girl's martial path was significantly inferior to his grandfather Butcher's. As the sword went in for the kill, Qin Mu changed direction while sticking as close to the ground as possible, barely dodging the attack. And in that instant, he caught a glimpse of a fine thread attached to the handle of the sword. One end of the thread was connected to the sword, while the other end of the thread was in the girl's hand. This thread was as fine as silk, making it especially difficult to notice. Chapter 6 is titled Dai, Youngun, translated by Ninetales and edited by Ninetales. The question arises if she could be using this fine thread to control the sword. Considering how thin the thread is, how can she make the sword change direction? Before he could think about the wonderful thread any further, Qin Mu immediately sprinted away. A moment later, the sword shot past him, stabbing deeply into the trunk of a huge tree with a dull thud. As if the sword were alive, it twitched in the tree trunk, yet couldn't pull itself out. Soon enough, the girl floated over and grabbed onto the treasure sword's hilt, pulling it out in exasperation. My white tiger vital chi still isn't strong enough to control my sword as if it were an extension of my body. Junior Sister Ching, it's already remarkable that you're able to shape your vital chi into a thread and use it to control your sword for battle. The boy who had crossed the river's waves with the girl arrived at her side and gave her a gentle smile. Your experience is lacking, not your cultivation. This is why our masters have brought us to the great ruins, to train and improve upon our shortcomings. In the past, all we cared about was cultivating, so we lack actual combat experience. This little devil is our chance to participate in actual combat. You will be able to perfectly control your sword with your energy right away. The other 3 youths caught up with the pair, and one of them smiled and said, "The little devil turned into an elk." Since elk are very nimble, he was able to dodge Senior Sister's flying sword. Senior Sister Qing regained her spirit and continued to direct the sword to stab at Qin Mu. She gave a lovely laugh and said, "Senior Brother Ku, don't attack for now. Leave this little devil for me to train my sword control on." Senior Brother Ku was the young boy who had crossed the river with her. He nodded at her words and said, "Come, junior brothers. Let us admire the sword skills of Junior Sister Qing." Questions swirled within Qin Mu's heart as he struggled to dodge the sword chasing him from behind. Controlling a sword with qi, could it be that the thread in the girl's hand was her vital qi and not an actual length of thread? Vital qi can be used to control a tease sword to that extent. Will he be able to do that? When he learned to use a pig slaughtering knife, Butcher only taught Qin Mu how to use both his hands to control the knife. Butcher never taught him how to use qi to control the knife, so he knew nothing in that regard. Seeing that female practitioner controlling her sword with her qi, an idea formed in Qin Mu's mind. Since qi could be used to control a sword, could his vital qi be used to control other things? However, he didn't have time to ponder that question, as Senior Sister Qing continued to control the sword and have it pursue Qin Mu. In addition to that, since Granny C had turned him into an elk, he found his limbs to be inconvenient. The vital energy in his body had become dormant and did not respond as it usually did. The sword flashed as it struck from behind, gazing at Qin Mu's back. He felt a chill run down his back, which was soon followed by the burning sensation of pain. He could tell that Senior Sister Qing had managed to wound his back. This is bad. An elk might be fast, but it is still slower than someone with an actual spirit body. If he gets injured again, he is afraid it will be difficult for him to escape as an elk. As soon as he finished that thought, he felt his mouth suddenly start to split apart. Yet it was not actually his mouth splitting apart, but the elk skin starting to peel away from his body. Starting with the mouth, Qin Mu immediately recalled the moment that Granny Sai had urged him to run. At that time, she had secretly removed a needle that had been protruding from the space between his eyebrows. It was the very needle that had pierced his heaven soul. Soon enough, his head had separated from the elk skin. The sword sliced through the air, slashing toward Qin Mu in an attempt to take his life. Qin Mu leaped forward with all the strength he could muster and freed himself from the elk skin, tumbling several yards ahead before getting to his feet and running. Behind him, the sword controlled by Senior Sister Qing cut the elk skin to pieces, its movements light like a falling petal and as fast as lightning. Pursuing Qin Mu and trying to kill him had apparently improved his sword skill tremendously. Getting free from the elk skin had momentarily delayed Qin Mu's escape, resulting in one of the youths traversing the treetops to land in front of him, cutting off his escape route. Both of them were only about a short distance away from each other. With this distance, they would run into each other in the very next instant. Qin Mu didn't have the time to change directions. So, without thinking, he subconsciously utilized the leg technique that Cripple taught him. Seeming to stumble forward, Qin Mu moved forward by clawing at the ground with his hands in place of his feet. His legs, which were now in the air, twisted along with the rest of his body, increasing in speed until they resembled a whirlwind. Like a spinning top, he sped toward the youth in front of him. The youth, who was older than Qin Mu by a few years, smiled at him decisively. He raised both of his arms to block, and they radiated a murky green glow as dragon scales began to appear on his skin. "Green Dragon's arms!" the youth cried. In the next instant, Qin Mu's legs collided with the youth's arms. A metal clank rang out twice, and before the smile could even be wiped from the youth's face, he grunted and lost his balance. Qin Mu's onslaught forced him back. The youth's sleeves were torn to shreds, remnants of the cloth fluttering around like paper butterflies. A summary and review of the given comic script is as follows. Dagon claw tattoos were visible on the skin of his arms. The claws coiled around them in a lifelike manner, and it was clear that the scales had come from those claws. However, both arms had become red and swollen after taking Qin Mu's legs head-on. "You hid iron weights on your legs," the youth exclaimed, both furious and astonished. Both of his arms trembled with pain. His gaze then landed on Qin Mu's feet. Qin Mu stood up and hurried away, reminded of the iron weights attached to his legs by the youth's words. He had been practicing leg techniques and was requested by Cripple to wear iron weights constantly, with a promise to never remove them. As Cripple tracked his progress, noticing Qin Mu's body becoming stronger and more sturdy over time, the one-legged man ensured the iron weights on Qin Mu's calves grew heavier. Additionally, Cripple had Mute the blacksmith create a pair of iron boots for Qin Mu, further increasing the weight. The pair of thick-soled iron boots weighed a significant amount, while each iron weight weighed a substantial amount as well. A considerable weight was attached to Qin Mu's legs. Cripple instructed Qin Mu to train until he could no longer feel the burden of the iron weights and boots. Qin Mu was allowed to remove the weights after a certain period. He had grown accustomed to wearing them while escaping, but removing them now would be risky. Qin Mu suddenly gathered strength in his leg and used a skill. His boots splattered like mud, shattering into flying debris, as his calf muscles flexed and expanded, busting out of the weight and shooting its remnants into the trees. Qin Mu stepped forward with his other leg, shattering the other iron boot and weight as his foot landed. Suddenly leaping into the air, Qin Mu felt extremely light. He easily reached a branch at the top of a tree, which frightened him greatly. High up in the tree, barefoot, Qin Mu's weight caused the branch to dip slightly. Sword lights flashed from below and came shooting upwards. Upon looking down, Qin Mu saw the tips of a dozen swords. Senior Sister Qing's sword handling became progressively stronger by the minutes. She wasn't controlling a dozen swords. She had created the illusion of a dozen swords with just one. Qin Mu suddenly recalled Cripple's words. "Don't think about whether or not a foothold will be able to withstand your weight." Summary and review of the comic script. As long as you are fast enough, even water will be like solid ground. Gas, air, everything will become solid ground. Pushing off with the tips of his toes, Qin Mu leaped forward. The sword lights burst into the sky, shedding the top of the huge tree he had perched in. Two youths leaped up and landed among the treetops, just in time to see Qin Mu striding through the tips of the trees, dashing away like a flowing wind. They could only stare blankly, astonished by Qin Mu's speed. "Why is he so fast?" one of them asked. "That kid is younger than us, but his cultivation seems to be slightly stronger." As the two youths thought about it, they saw their senior brother Q vanish like smoke and begin to chase Qin Mu at an even faster speed. Summary and review of the comic script. As expected of senior brother Q, he is much more powerful, having reached the pinnacle of the spirit embryo. Both of them sighed in admiration, with senior brother Q personally going after him. There is no way that little devil will be able to escape. A dark shadow suddenly materialized in the forest. A hairy palm the size of a woven mat came hurtling towards senior brother Q, slapping him as he dashed through the air. Senior brother Q flew backward, spinning uncontrollably, and crashing to the ground. He tumbled for a short distance before coming to a stop, coughing up a mouthful of blood as he tried to sit up. The youths stopped immediately upon hearing a warning about a devil ape. A huge black gorilla emerged from the trees, its eyes a deep red and its fangs protruding from its mouth. It beat its chest and bellowed, causing Qin Mu, who had run ahead earlier, to be stuck in the air and now lying unmoving at the gorilla's feet. The youths couldn't tell if Qin Mu was dead, and senior sister Qing stared at him intently. Since one palm strike from that devil ape heavily injured senior Bothe Qiu, and that little devil also received the same hit, he should be dead, right? Before she could finish speaking, she jumped in surprise. Qin Mu, who was lying on the ground in front of the devil ape, had tilted his head slightly to ascertain the situation. "That kid isn't dead yet," she said in disbelief. The pitch-black devil ape paused a few times, then stopped when it saw that the rest of the youths didn't dare to step forward. Then it looked down at Qin Mu, slipping his body over with 2 fingers. "Young one, die." Seeing Qin Mu's wide-open eyes, bleeding from his entire face, and even the tongue which was sticking out, it was clear he could not be any more dead. Sighing in satisfaction, the devil ape threw Qin Mu's body aside. It then sat down and started picking leaves from a nearby tree, eating them. The devil ape is a herbivore despite its fierce nature. Qin Mu continues to bleed from his face, keeping his eyes open as he slowly crawls away using his elbows. The devil ape turns its head to look at Qin Mu's body, which has gone limp again. It remains motionless as it gazes at Qin Mu's body. The ape stretches out its finger and pokes what it thinks is a corpse, discovering that Qin Mu's body has become icy. The devil ape seems satisfied, then turns back and focuses on eating tree leaves without concern. Qin Mu's body is unresponsive, and the devil ape continues to eat, unaware of any potential threat. The scene is intense, with Qin Mu's injuries and the devil ape's actions creating a tense atmosphere. Witnessing all of this from a distance, senior sister Qing could no longer help herself. "Hey, big fella, don't you find it weird that the young one's corpse became so cold and had so quickly?" Seemingly able to understand her, the devil ape slapped its forehead and immediately turned around. The young one, however, had already gotten up and started to frantically flee. The devil ape erupted with fury and started chasing after Qin Mu. However, after a few steps, it realized that its speed was inferior to Qin Mu's because of how large it was. Such a humiliation enraged the devil ape. It uprooted trees, one after another, running its hand along the length of one and getting rid of its branches before throwing it like an enormous spear. The devil ape threw an object through the air at an astonishing speed, clearly exiting an extraordinary amount of force. However, the ape's throw wasn't accurate, so the object crashed and landed several yards away from Qin Mu. The devil ape became even angrier and wanted to throw another object, but Qin Mu had run off into the distance. It no longer had a target to vent its anger on, so all it could do was beat its chest repeatedly. Senior brother K quietly called out to the other youths that Devil's cultivation is definitely inferior to ours, and his injuries must be worse than mine. There's no way he'll be able to go far. Pushing himself to his feet, he grunted as intense pain hit his chest. He was afraid that many of his ribs had been broken by the devil ape's strike. However, he believed that if Qin Mu could withstand a blow from the devil ape, he could endure it as well. He just hadn't expected Qin Mu to be that strong. Qin Mu's cultivation definitely wasn't weak. His vital energy lacking attributes was the only reason he couldn't display his full potential. Despite his young age, if one were to compare their cultivation, Qin Mu certainly wasn't weaker than any of them, including senior brother Quick. Taking a detour around the devil ape's territory, the youths eventually found Qin Mu's trail again. Just as senior brother Chiu said, Qin Mu had been heavily injured by the devil ape as well, having no choice but to increase his speed to the point that they could catch up. However, as they continued to chase Qin Mu, they discovered that Qin Mu's speed gradually increased as if his injuries were no longer an issue. This little fellow must have some miraculous healing method. The hearts of all four youths sank. Senior brother Chiu had consumed medicine that their sect had given him, but it clearly wasn't as effective as Qin Mu's method. Seeing how quickly Qin Mu's speed had risen, they inferred that his injuries were definitely healing at a rate visible to the naked eye. This kind of healing made their eyes and hearts burn with desire. The medicine in our sect is not of the highest quality. Summary and review of the comic script. If they catch the devil bat and obtain the recipe for the miraculous medicine, their masters would be pleased and greatly reward them. However, contrary to their thoughts, Qin Mu did not consume any medicine. Instead, he inhaled and exhaled, circulating the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique that the village chief taught him, which was actually the most common Daoyin technique. Cultivating with this technique throughout his life, Qin Mu made a discovery. He realized his vital energy became more active as he practiced. The speed of its circulation also became faster. This differed from what he was taught. The Overload Body 3 elixir technique enabled Qin Mu to meditate and control his breathing, circulating and nurturing his vital energy to condition his body. Over the course of the last period of cultivation, Qin Mu had followed the village chief's instructions on cultivating the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique to the letter. Now, however, he had discovered that it was better to run while cultivating the technique. Qin Mu dashed forward as fast as possible, and the circulation of the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique became faster, nourishing and improving both his innate speed and the constitution of his body. In addition to that, wave after wave of vital qi flowed through Qin Mu's organs, limbs, bones, and even the tendons between his muscles and bones, cleansing them over and over again. Qin Mu's injured organs and broken bones, which he'd sustained from the devil ape's strike, recovered with each cleansing wave of vital qi. Senior brother Qing and the others thought that he was relying on a high-quality medicine, yet never would they have expected that he was just relying on the unreliable Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. Qin Mu eventually realized that his vital qi couldn't reach a certain part of his body, the space right between his eyebrows. Between his eyebrows was a space the width of a finger. Vital qi could not reach this space. Although his vital qi could pass into his scalp and wash over his skull, cleansing and strengthening both of them, it would come to a stop every time it reached the scent of his bow. It was as if there was an invisible wall blocking his vital qi from passing though. When Eve directed his vital qi to push the wall, something even strange occurred. Qin Mu could hear a mysterious voice. This voice sounded as if it was coming from high in the sky, as distant as the heavens above. It sounded melodious and divine, resonating like the voice of a divine being passing down a DC. Summary and review of the comic script. Every time this voice sounded, Qin Mu's vital energy would surge like an uncontrollable tide and fill the space between his eyebrows. Could this be the spirit embryo wall? Qin Mu said inadvertently. Qin Mu was confused, as village chief and the other inhabitants of disabled elderly village had explained walls and wall breaking to him. Walls were the things sealing the treasures in one's body, while wall breaking was to break the seal and attain the treasure inside. However, they hadn't told him which part of the body the spirit embryo wall was, or how to break open the spirit embryo wall. What Qin Mu didn't know was that it wasn't that village chief and the others didn't want to tell him any of this. Summary of the comic script. The world had a limitation in terms of breaking through the spirit embryo wall. A person with an ordinary human body and a person with a spirit body existed on two inherently different levels. Individuals with spirit bodies were born with an innately unsealed spirit embryo wall, placing them above everyone else. In contrast, the spirit embryo wall of ordinary people was sealed, relegating them to a lower class. People with spirit bodies were detached, remote, and barely concerned about the needs of ordinary people. Although talented practitioners emerged from among ordinary people, the village chief and others had never heard of any of them unsealing their spirit embryo wall. As a result, they were unaware of how a normal human could break through it. Vital qi surged at the invisible wall at the center of his eyebrows as Qin Mu continued his frantic escape. Review of the comic script. The comic script presents a world with a clear divide between individuals with spirit bodies and those with ordinary human bodies. The spirit embryo wall serves as a barrier that separates these two groups, with those having unsealed walls holding a higher status. The script also touches on the theme of talented practitioners emerging from ordinary people, but the lack of information on how to break through the spirit embryo wall leaves them at a disadvantage. The story seems to be building up to Qin Mu's attempt to break through this wall, with his frantic escape and surging vital qi hinting at an intense and potentially pivotal moment in the story. Summary and review of the comic script. The mysterious voice would make his vital energy automatically recoil from the wall. Qin Mu was patient and believed he would succeed eventually, despite not being able to break through the wall currently. He didn't plan on revealing this discovery regarding the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique to the elderly of the village, instead deciding to surprise them after succeeding in breaking through the spirit embryo wall. It was hard to tell whether it would be more of a surprise or shock to them. Senior brother Qu and the four other youths continued to chase Qin Mu, growing progressively more worried as the little devil ahead of them not only recovered from his injuries, but also increased his speed, which was terrifying. It meant that even as Qin Mu went about his life, his cultivation was also improving. Cultivating had a set of rules that anyone and everyone needed to follow. Even when one succeeded in breaking through, any progress in their cultivation needed to occur slowly, over time, not all at once. Despite these universal rules, they could clearly feel the cultivation of this little devil constantly getting stronger. It terrified them. Luckily, Qin Mu was originally inferior to the five youths. Even though his cultivation was currently improving, there was still a gap between them and him. However, catching up to him would be no easy feat for them. Since he had suffered at the hands of the devil ape, Qin Mu had become much more careful and would make sure to avoid the territories of the strange beasts. Whenever Apothecary bought Qin Mu out to gather herbs, he would tell him that strange beasts were very intelligent, that each of them had their own territory, and would leave signs to indicate that, such as a tree stripped of its bark, bones buried in the ground, beast skulls on wooden stakes, or traces of urine. As long as one saw such signs, they would be able to just avoid the beasts. When Qin Mu had encountered the devil ape, there had been a mark of a gigantic fist, indicating the area was its territory. Qin Mu had accidentally rushed into its territory because he had missed that sign. Since he was now being more careful, he wouldn't make the same mistake. However, even he didn't accidentally trespass on a strange beast's territory. Many would still venture out of them to search for food, filling the great ruins with danger. Qin Mu eventually found his way to a swamp where he saw two strange beasts having a territorial dispute. The beasts battling each other were a coxcomb, snake-neck snow condor, and a poisonous swamp dragon python. The former created gale winds with a sweep of its wings, its huge body soaring through the air. The latter twitched through the swamp below, causing havoc and destruction with its long body. Before Qin Mu could even enter the swamp, the hurricane of force caused by the two giant creatures swept him away. Upon landing, he came face to face with a startled bison that almost trampled him to death. The realization made Qin Mu's heart sink as he thought, I keep getting farther and farther from the village. The people behind him were still chasing relentlessly, making it impossible for him to return to the village. However, even more frightening than that was the fact that the sun would be setting soon. Qin Mu and Granny C had left the village right after noon, and now that the sun would start to set, darkness would soon fall. If he couldn't make it back to the village before that happened, he would face great danger. The sky's getting dark, Senior Brother Qu echoed in the distance behind Qin Mu. As Senior Brother Qu and his companions had also noticed the setting sun, and the youth that Qin Mu had kicked away wore an uneasy expression. Master said that the great ruins were cursed, that they would become a forbidden region when the sky went dark. We need to get back to the village, which has the protection of the stone statues, otherwise the only path left is death. Senior Brother Q shook his head. It's too late to turn back now. As far as we've gone, we won't be able to return to village before nightfall. The darkness is as dangerous to the devil bat as it is to us. We have no choice but to see where the little devil is going to hide. Qin Mu thought to himself calmly, Granny once said that if I got lost in the great ruins and couldn't return to the village, I shouldn't panic. There are many remnants of civilization in the great ruins. If a place can be found to hide in, survival might be possible. Two conditions must be met for a remnant to be considered safe. First, it must have stone statues similar to those in the village. Second, it is necessary to check if there are a large amount of strange beasts in the remnant. Most are intelligent, so they would know where to go to escape the darkness. Many remnants of civilization exist in the great ruins. Qin Mu had passed by traces of abandoned cities and villages earlier on. Remnants of civilization can be found in the great ruins, and finding a hiding place could make survival possible. Conditions for a safe remnant include stone statues like those in the village, and checking for strange beasts, which are often intelligent and aware of where to go to escape danger. The great ruins contain remnants of civilization, which Qin Mu had seen earlier in the form of abandoned cities and villages. One by one, strange beasts split the earth, emerging from tunnels they had been digging, and began to scramble frantically. Qin Mu even saw water erupt from the swamp, looking over to see a few scarlet fish several yards in length leaping from the water's surface and using their fins to flee on land as if they were legs. The sight confused Qin Mu, wondering if fish were still considered fish if they could sprint on land. All of these strange beasts are heading in the same direction, Qin Mu thought, and I will definitely be able to hide from the darkness there. Spirits high, Qin Mu dashed alongside the beasts. As the sky grew dimmer and dimmer, the darkness in the distance came surging in like a tidal wave, resembling a huge flood that engulfed every mountain, valley, and all of the wilderness it came across. One by one, strange beasts split the earth, emerging from tunnels they had been digging, and began to scramble frantically. Qin Mu even saw water erupt from the swamp, looking over to see a few scarlet fish, several yards in length, leaping from the water's surface, and using their fins to flee on land as if they were legs. The sight confused Qin Mu, wondering if fish were still considered fish if they could sprint on land. All of these strange beasts are heading in the same direction, Qin Mu thought, and I will definitely be able to hide from the darkness there. Spirits high, Qin Mu dashed alongside the beasts. As the sky grew dimmer and dimmer, the darkness in the distance came surging in like a tidal wave, resembling a huge flood that engulfed every mountain, valley, and all of the wilderness it came across. Qin Mu considered the darkness overtaking the land an extremely stunning sight, despite having seen it before. The darkness flooded towards him, accompanied by strange beasts, yet the animals continued to change in its direction. Qin Mu hesitated, wondering if there was a safe place ahead to take shelter from the darkness, fearing a tragic end if it wasn't the case. With the darkness approaching fast, he realized turning back wouldn't allow him to make it to the village, and he wouldn't be able to outrun the darkness. Gritting his teeth, he desperately pushed forward. The battle between Gani Sai and the Li Reeves' 5 elders had reached a breaking point near the disabled elderly village. Originally, 4 elders had been attacking Gani Sai, but when they failed to take him down promptly, the 5th elder, Qi Yanbing, joined the fight. With Qi Yanbing added to their onslaught, they set up the 5 elements devil-purifying Taigum. Up to this point, Gani Sai had barely been able to fend off the attacks of the 4 elders, but his strength surprisingly increased when Qi Yanbing added to their efforts, allowing him to continue fighting against the beasts. The old woman proved to be unstoppable, even for the 5-element devil-purifying tiger. The 5 elders were startled and frustrated by this realization, finally understanding that the old woman intended to take care of them all at once. She had pretended to be weak to lure Qi Yanbing into the battle and prevent his escape. With swift movements, Granny Sai navigated the area effortlessly, her silver needles moving as if they had a mind of their own, quickly covering the Li River's 5 elders in wounds. Threads attached to the needles now ran through the 5 elders, binding their souls and bodies, preventing them from moving. Gani Sai walked towards them, scissors in hand and a bright smile on her face. Gani hasn't treated human skin for a long time. She wondered if her skills have gotten rusty. As soon as she came to stand in front of Qi Yanbing, he suddenly opened his mouth. A silver pellet shot from his mouth and streaked towards Gani Sai's face. The moment the silver pellet came into contact with the air, it grew in size. The pellet instantly became a huge sphere made of pure light, expanding into a sphere made of light. This sudden change caught Gani Sai off guard, and she immediately moved backward in retreat. Her body went limp, and like an earthworm squirming through the air, she dodged the lights. At the same time, she threw out the scissors in her hand. Like 2 silver dragons, the scissors flashed through the air, cutting and snipping at the sword lights. As nimble as she was, Gani Sai had still been caught off guard. One of the myriad sword lights had managed to strike her from behind, and since she was a hunchback, the sword light had essentially found her blind spot. Soon enough, the sword lights that had filled the sky vanished, as pieces of broken swords came crashing to the ground, covering several acres of the area. The silver pellet that the sword lights came from returned to its original, diminutive size and fell to the ground with a clack. Gani Sai returned to the ground as well, pulling the sword out of her back with a frown. "You still dodged it," coaxed Qi Yanbi, the leader of the 5 elders. Despair filled his face as he cried. A large amount of swords were hidden inside that silver pellet. Yet at such a close range, you still managed to dodge them. You are definitely not an ordinary figure among the devils, but an old woman like you has never been seen among their number. Just who are you? The second he asked that question, he noticed something strange about Granny Sai's back. Although the hunchback did have a wound that the sword caused, there wasn't any blood flowing from it. Instead, light shone on it, revealing that the inside was hollow. "This isn't your true appearance." The realization made Qi Yanbing's hair stand on end. Gani Sai walked towards them, scissors in hand and a bright smile on her face. Gani hasn't treated human skin for a long time. She wondered if her skills have gotten rusty. As soon as she came to stand in front of Qi Yanbing, he suddenly opened his mouth. A silver pellet shot from his mouth and streaked towards Gani Sai's face. The moment the silver pellet came into contact with the air, it grew in size. The pellet instantly became a huge sphere made of pure light, expanding into a sphere made of light. This sudden change caught Gani Sai off guard, and she immediately moved backward in retreat. Her body went limp, and like an earthworm, squirming through the air, she dodged the lights. At the same time, she threw out the scissors in her hand. The grandmother frowned, her voice surprisingly soft and sweet, not matching her elderly appearance. She said someone was wearing another person's skin, and that the skin was taken. The grandmother muttered that the air was leaking as she pressed a hand to her throat. A woman takes out a needle and thread from a basket and sews something on her back, then tests out her voice. which returns to normal. However, the strange voice has already provoked a drastic change in Qi Yanbing, who looks like he has seen a ghost. He says he has heard the voice before and knows who the woman is, claiming she is the mistress of the heavenly devil cult. As Qi Yanbing speaks, Granny C's expression changes slightly, and she tugs at the thread binding everyone together. Before he can finish his sentence, the Li River's 5 elders are sliced to pieces. Their body remains falling to the ground with a wet thud. The thread, surprisingly, did not have any bloodstains after the incident. It then curled up and returned to the basket on its own, as if it were alive. Granny Sai let out a snort of decision and chuckled to herself. She asked how long someone had been there, using a derogatory term. Behind her, a person hobbled over using a crutch for support, with a wide grin on their face. The person claimed to have just arrived and did not see or hear anything. Granny Sai glanced at the person and gave them a bright smile. As long as you didn't hear anything, seeing is fine. Let us return to the village. Instead of immediately agreeing, Sipple hesitated. For his entire life, Sectmaster Li Tianxing of the Heavenly Devil Cult was revered as wise and powerful. In spite of that, in his late years, he made a stupid, pitiable mistake. He suddenly fancied one of the petite demonesses of the younger generation. He disposed of his original wife and took the young demoness as his new one. Throwing the Heavenly Devil Cult into an uproar, Sipple said, calmly reciting the story from memory. During the first night as husband and wife, Li Tianxing's new wife attempted to harm him and stole a significant item from the Heavenly Devil Cult. Every member of the cult pursued her, but she managed to evade capture. A conversation ensued, with someone asking if such an incident truly occurred. The response was that the woman's whereabouts remain unknown. An elderly person then recounted a tale of a man who had attained extraordinary abilities, with his legs being referred to as divine. This individual, however, chose to utilize his remarkable speed for improper purposes. The act excited him, and he became addicted to it, eventually making a name for himself as the world's greatest thief, who could never be caught. Since he wasn't a god, his title, which had God in it, angered those who were. As if it were decreed by the gods, when the man went to Eternal Peace Empire to steal the disc of the Emperor, he was discovered by the Imperial Percepto. Although he lost a leg in the ensuing battle, the man still managed to escape from the Imperial Percepto, taking the disc of the Emperor and disappearing without a trace. Despite his reputation as the man below the gods, the Imperial Percepto wasn't able to catch the thief. In fact, he probably still has one of the thief's legs, and is still waiting to return it to its rightful owner. Ganny stared at Sipple thoughtfully, and the two shared a laugh. Ganny, we are all people from the same village, Sipple said, his grin growing wide. We have our own secrets and made a promise to not ask about another person's history. From now on, I am also, he swore. I won't say a word. Ganny stared once more, then started walking towards the village, basket in tow. Did someone tell you what happened and ask you to come for me? Sipple shook his head. A disturbance was caused by you and those elderly men. Everyone in the village sensed residual waves from your battle, so the village chief sent me to check on you. Ganny Sai's expression changed, and she anxiously asked, has Mue returned to the village? I didn't see him on the way here. This is bad. The two of them rushed back to disabled elderly village, and even before they got there, the sun finished setting as darkness rose on the horizon. It climbed higher and higher into the sky, spreading across the horizon and enveloping everything in its path. Ganny Sai searched throughout the village, looking for Qin Mu. Mue isn't back yet, she asked frantically. Then the darkness engulfed disabled elderly village. There's no need to worry, Ganny. Summary and review of the comic script. Village chief stops Ganny Sai from taking a stone statue to look for Qin Mu, saying they have taught him everything he needs to know to survive in the Great Ruins. The village chief reassures Ganny Sai that Qin Mu can survive on his own. Ganny Sai is devastated but acknowledges the truth. Knowing the darkness has overwhelmed the Great Ruins, and Qin Mu can take care of himself if he is still alive, he would be able to survive the night. If he were dead, then there would be no point in her searching the stone statue outside to find him. Granny Sai thought to herself that he still has that jade pendant with him. However, even though the pendant on Qin Mu's chest came to mind, she knew that it had a limited range of protection meant for protecting a small baby. Since Qin Mu had grown up, the jade pendant's protective glow was only large enough to cover his chest. Granny C muttered, "Be smart, Muir. You will definitely survive." Chapter 9 describes a scene where Qin Mu accompanies a group of strange beasts and notices the land ahead sloping downwards into a valley. The valley is filled with ancient structures, such as ruined palaces, a large plaza, and other majestic landscapes. Qin Mu expresses excitement at finding remnants of civilization. At the front of these ruins stands a large gate made of marble pillars with dragon sculptures coiled upwards. The group of beasts moves towards the gate, heading into the ruins. Qin Mu inadvertently looks up and feels a numb sensation on his scalp. The darkness was flowing down into the valley like a wave of ink. He screamed internally. The darkness would soon reach the gate to the ruins and engulf it. As if they could sense this, the strange beasts running alongside Qin Mu grew frantic. They rushed the gate with even more ferocity, ramming into and crushing other careless beasts to death. Now wasn't the time to be calm. If they couldn't reach the ruins in front of them before the darkness arrived, they would die horrible deaths. Sprinting forward madly, Qin Mu grabbed onto a behemoth's tail. Unaware of the human hitching a ride on it, the behemoth bolted forward like a majestic black mountain, pushing aside and trampling all of the other beasts in its path. Some of the beasts that the behemoth left in its wake leaped forward and latched onto its tail as well, allowing it to bring them into the ruins. As he gripped the behemoth's tail, Qin Mu looked below him and saw that all of the strange beasts that had been ferocious during the day were now trembling in fear. They clung to the behemoth's tail for their lives. When he turned to look further behind them, he also saw the 5 youths frantically chasing the behemoth, scrambling for the ruins. Finally, just before the darkness engulfed the gate, the behemoth burst through it, rushing into the ruins like a gust of wind. At that same exact moment, the 5 Lai River's disciples rushed in through the gate as well. However, of the 5 youths, only 3 of them managed to make it all the way through before the darkness engulfed it. Senior brother Qu, senior sister Qing, and 1 other youth made it through, but the other 2 disciples were a hair too late. Between the 2, one only managed to get an arm through the gate. The other only got the front half of his body, though the back half had been claimed by the darkness. As senior brother Qu passed through the gate, he immediately tried to grab onto his 2 junior brothers. Taking hold of the visible arm, he forcefully pulled it towards him, causing a horrifying white skeleton to emerge from the darkness. Before senior brother Q could even reach for the other youth, he collapsed to the ground. The blood of the surviving disciples ran cold. Flesh, blood, and clothing still covered the front half of the youth, but all of the other half of his body had been stripped down to the bone, devoured by some unknown thing in the darkness. "Why does this darkness exist?" senior sister Qing screamed. "What lurks inside of it?" Senior brother Kui struggled to stay composed, then released a trembling breath. The other only got the front half of his body, though the back half had been claimed by the darkness. As senior brother Kwa passed through the gate, he immediately tried to grab onto his 2 junior brothers. Taking hold of the visible arm, he forcefully pulled it towards him, causing a horrifying white skeleton to emerge from the darkness. Before senior brother Ku could even reach for the other youth, he collapsed to the ground. The blood of the surviving disciples ran cold. Flesh, blood, and clothing still covered the front half of the youth, but all of the other death is like a lamp going out. Our 2 junior brothers were brave and heroic. They died trying to vanquish a devil, he solemnly said. That devil bat purposely came to these ruins at the last possible minute to take advantage of the darkness and use it to kill us. He is somewhere in these ruins. He won't be able to escape us with the darkness everywhere, said the youth who survived. Ruthless fury could be heard in his voice, a clear indication of how much the deaths of his fellow disciples affected him. Let's find him. We'll avenge our junior brothers by defeating that devil bat. He is over there, senior sister Qing exclaimed. Seeing Qin Mu jump from the tail of the behemoth, the senior brother's accusations annoyed Qin Mu, who replied that the seniors were the ones who chased him for no reason, and their relentless pursuit until nightfall led to the deaths of 2 junior brothers. Qin Mu argued that he did not provoke them, and was innocent. Senior sister Qing gritted her teeth, angry at Qin Mu's argument. Qin Mu became enraged, yelling that the seniors were the ones who killed an entire herd of animals, yet they accused Qin Mu and Granny of being wrong for killing 1 elk to make clothing. Senior brother Q stepped forward, his face darkening. The little devil is skilled at stirring up doubt in our hearts. We don't need to waste time talking, we just need to stop him. As soon as he said this, the three of them prepared to attack. However, the moment they did, a low growl resounded throughout the ruins. They looked around to find out where it came from, and what they saw instilled shock in their hearts. Gathered throughout the ruins were hundreds of thousands of strange beasts. There were even plenty of beasts that were powerful enough to have their own territories. Every single beast looked down at the three remaining disciples, with malice and an ominous glint in all of their eyes.